Hello, Nadim. Good afternoon.
Hello, Natalina. How are you?
Fine, and you?
Still at home here in Tunisia. I was in quarantine, and now they've decided on the weekend to close the schools.
So you should stay at home.
Today, tomorrow, I will go to the office. Jose is on leave for 2 weeks, and he will also be in Brussels to discuss our return to Tripoli. So I have to go at least 2-3 times a week, but it's a little bit strange. They go back and forth here in Tunisia with their measures.
Yeah, now it's for 48 hours, no, for the PCR.
They went back, 48 hours for the PCR test in terms of how old it can be, but 5 days of quarantine minimum.
Quarantine, okay.
And curfew at 7 o'clock in the evening. And
before it was?
10 o'clock.
Okay, yes. They are imposing more restrictions.
I think we're starting, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alberto Castelvecchi, and I am particularly pleased and honored to introduce and coordinate this webinar dedicated to the European Common Security and Defense Policy in Libya, with a particular focus on the Eunavfor IRINI mission and EUBAM Libya missions. And before giving the floor to our distinguished speaker, Franco Frattini, Fabio Agostini, Natalina Cea, and Nadim Karkouti, let me thank Honorable Frattini, President of SIOI, for hosting this webinar in the center of Rome. And we think it's got a particular significance that from one of the capitals of Europe, we have the possibility to launch this webinar and to discuss with so many distinguished speakers and distinguished audience. Because at the moment, we have a new era in the stabilization process of Libya. We're just doing the first steps. It will not be easy, it will be delicate, and it will request the effort of many political and international actors. But the voice of Europe and of the European Union cannot be away from this. We have to take steps, we have to do things. We will have many lessons learned after these missions will have carried their duty. But for sure, one of my old professors in the university always told me, if you want to have lessons learned, you have to go to school. And the school field is quite complicated in these days. So it's a great pleasure, really, and I'm honored to have such distinguished speakers who have a really deep knowledge of what does it take to stabilize such a difficult situation, and who have a mission to accomplish, to make the voice of Europe, its moral suasion, its values, its peace stabilization effort, not only in military, but also in civilian missions, very present and strong in the present context. So I'm particularly honored to give the floor to the President of SIOI, Honorable Frattini, former Foreign Affairs, Regional Affairs, former President of the Commission for Italian Security Services, and one of the greatest experts our country can boast in the field of international cooperation and security. President Frattini, the floor is yours. Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks, Professor Castelvecchi. It's a great honor for SIOI, for me personally, to have this opportunity to have with me together on the podium, Professor Castelvecchi and Admiral Agostini, as well as you, Madam, the head of the mission EUBAM, and the deputy head of mission, dear Mr. Karkouti. I remember very well myself some of the, I would say, root factors that led to the current situation of crisis and instability in Libya. Since I used to be foreign minister in 2011 and before, when many of the situations, I would say there were the main symptoms of causes of what happens later, moving from the well-known question that easily used to put before the leaders, before deciding the mission on Libya, what next? What will come next? What will be the asset? What will be the stabilization process? And unfortunately, as you remember perfectly, in full honesty, former President Obama, in one of his books, said one of my mistakes was to say, okay, green light to the mission without having in mind precisely what next. And all those situations that we all know perfectly are now in a situation, in a moment, which is showing the rest of the world some promising elements and some promising perspectives. First of all, European Union undertook a review of the common security and defense policy. This is a very important element to be taken into consideration as one of the frame. The world has changed. The COVID pandemic aggravates some changes, some instabilities in crisis areas surrounding the main regional priority, which is Mediterranean region for our country and for our Europe. And of course, we have other many priorities which are taken into consideration in the review of the common security and defense policy. I mentioned the Western Balkans, I mentioned Middle East, and of course, the Northern Africa with a special focus on Libya. In my view, having in mind my 4.5 term as a Vice President of the European Commission in charge of security, justice, including immigration and fundamental rights, I think European Union can become the first reliable stability, security, prosperity factor in Libya and beyond. It has the opportunity and the possibility now to be as such. Our ambition as Europeans should be to make full use, never should forget this principle, making full use of our traditional European soft power, complemented by military action when necessary, by involving as many as possible local actors. My idea is a comprehensive, broader concept of regional activity in cooperation between the ones and the others. What is our ultimate goal? It is, in my view, institution building, particularly talking about Libya. I used to say, when there was the fall of Gaddafi regime, in the years later, between 2012 and today, we run the risk to be remembered for winning the war and losing the peace. This is the problem, because I remember myself, immediately after the terrible assassination of Gaddafi, when we tried immediately to explore institution building missions, even missions of NATO delegation, then Europe was completely trapped into economic crisis. There was no attention enough to that region, and I don't need to elaborate on that because you know better than me what happened between 2012 and today. We need, first of all, rule of law reforms. We need to create administration and security sector to replace militias. Militias control, as you know better than me, large part of the territory of Libya. Fighting against all form of organized crime is another priority Unfortunately, the territorial dimension of Libya, the porosity of the borders, particularly you in EUBAM are particularly committed to that. The porosity of the borders, thousands of kilometers in the middle of desert, make extremely difficult to prevent and to stop the flows of organized crime, trafficking in human beings, weapons, and drugs. Unfortunately, in cooperation with terrorist organizations, it is not a secret what are the links with Al-Qaeda Maghreb, with other terrorist groups that now found a very profitable routes, for example, for drugs, no longer only from East Afghanistan, but from Central America, via Senegal, via Sahara, to the north in the rest of Europe. So there are new phenomena that are under your responsibility. I'm speaking about EUBAM on the land that are extremely, extremely important. On the seas, well, Mission IRINI is the best way. Since it became fully operational in the autumn 2020, to concretely contribute to the pacification of Libya after the quite poor results. We have to be serious and honest of the previous missions, primarily focusing on fighting only human trafficking or not dealing with human trafficking, depending the different points of view of European different member states, because also these contributed to aggravate the lack of unity in the previous missions that, fortunately, speaking about IRINI, does not exist any longer. And frankly speaking, the other missing element that I see now, thanks to the leadership of Admiral Agostini and his staff, there is a political support. Political support is the key. If you don't have political support behind you, it's absolutely difficult to succeed. Despite the number of boats or the vessels, despite the assets you have at your disposal, political, strong commitment is badly needed. And now I start feeling around IRINI and EUBAM, political consensus is there. And this is another element to be taken into consideration. Mission EUBAM, year after year, since 2013, works as a stabilizing factor on security, on police support, on helping and broadening the institutional reform path. You know better than me. You cannot compare the situation we found in Libya with the other in other states of post-crisis, like Iraq, or the current crisis in Syria. In those states, the state exists, used to exist. We like or not the model of state. If you think about Libya, there was no state. This is the problem. We have not to rebuild. We have to build institutions, viable institution, security institution. If you think about, I would say, security, how is possible to talk about an integrated security plan while militias continue to keep control on large routes in part of the territory? This is the challenge. And of course, when you think about the Libyans, how to help Libyans to be well trained, to help reducing the porosity of the borders, particularly the southern borders, that are borders with one of the key regions in the world for security, Sahel, Sahara, which has become in the focus of the main supranational organization in the world. These are the challenges, and all of this should be done, as it is in the tradition of Europe, by striking the right balance between security and fundamental rights. This is the other extremely difficult challenge. When I remember my meetings at the time with Mr. Gaddafi, when together with President Guterres, we have been talking about sending UNHCR, the agency of UN, to monitor the situation of those poor desperates instead of simply training Coast Guard and police of Libya. The answer of Mr. Gaddafi was simple, while smiling. Dear friend, in our country, we don't have refugees. They are all my brothers, my African brothers. I myself take care of them. When one says something like that, you can understand that mission impossible, practically, as it was. Now the world has completely changed, and there is room, there is concrete room, political and operational room to move away. A very key role, in my view, have any forms of international cooperation mission worldwide. If there is no cooperation among the missions that have a role on the territory concerned, I think about the good cooperation between EUBAM and UNSMIL. I think about the cooperation between IRINI and EUBAM. Without this kind of permanent contact and concrete cooperation, frankly speaking, our level of ambition will result as reduced. I want also to highlight how important are the agreements between the European mission, EUBAM, and non-European states that are ready to cooperate. A good number, a good deployment of foreign experts that for sure will contribute for the good. Well, the aim is to work together in view of helping the transitional government of national unity on the training, much better than in the past, Libyan Navy and Coast Guard. And of course, the what I could define as the integrated conflict prevention strategy is echoed in the clear message sent from our Prime Minister, Mr. Draghi, and the Italian Foreign Minister, Mr. Di Maio, during the recent meeting with the new Prime Minister of Libya. This concept of integration, we are not talking about only economy. We are not only talking about new opportunity for foreign investors. We are not talking only about opportunities for foreign companies. We are talking, first of all, about how to build an integrated, well-elaborated concept of security for this country. Well, this is the distinction between what has been considered a purely commercial strategy and the commitment to reassume in Libya by Europe political and strategic role. This is my view, the number one key point. We have to consider that are many, unfortunately, many willing and wishing for the status quo. You know better than me, Admiral Agostini, Madam Chair, you know that many would easily accommodate to the status quo instead of working for the evolution in view of the next December elections. It is clear there are spheres of influence. There is a risk of concrete de facto partition of Libya in 2, if not 3, and this would be the nightmare. This would be the nightmare, in my view. I will tell you what is not just an anecdote, but gives the sense from a wise man who used to be the transitional president of Libya, Mr. Abdel Jalil, an old man, an old judge, sacked from the Gaddafi regime, who in Benghazi during one of my visits told me, well, Libya, in my experience, a long experience, he said to me, was kept united by the King Idris or by the hand of dictator. Never people working like the Tuareg in the desert will give orders from Tobruk. And the same applies from people working in Benghazi, never obeying to the orders from Tripoli. This is the principle of tribal structure of Libya. This is the reason for which we need inclusiveness. And this principle that I will never forget, this phrase of a wise man that knew very well his own country, has to be taken always into consideration. Well, I understand perfectly. Inclusiveness is a challenge. It's not taken for granted. We have to recognize that tribal structure means diversities, often means frictions. But this is the challenge ahead of us, ahead of the mission IRINI, ahead of the mission EUBAM. And I have to say, mission IRINI in particularly got recently a very important visits of Mr. Borrell, Mr. Di Maio, and Italian Defense Minister Guerini. The three paid tribute 1 year after the launch of the mission, not only to you, Mr. Admiral Agostini, and your personnel involved, but they mention the near to 2,000 investigations on commercial vessels. And these are facts. These are not promises. Near to 2,000 investigations on commercial vessels, as well as some so-called friendly approach on the ships and some boarding on the ships for well-funded reasons. And I think I have to recognize, and this is requiring even more a political effort to explain to those that don't know in depth what is happening in that region. In the same weeks of the visits, commending Mission IRINI and Admiral Agostini, a monster report of United Nations Security Council, you know better than me, near to 400 pages, has been published, and points of weaknesses of arms embargo are highlighted more, too much more than the good results achieved. We have to be frank. We pay tribute to the Security Council, but we have to redouble our efforts to explain that is quite difficult from New York to write a report of 400 pages highlighting what is easy to criticize while underestimating what are, given the current circumstances, the great results achieved. I'm very frank, since being a judge in the Supreme Court of Italy, I feel free to speak without any kind of problem of politically correct. But this is my personal and deep conviction. Well, violations and elusions of embargo are seen as, I would say, are seen as direct responsibility of the countries that are mentoring the two factions in former conflict till, of course, the date of the ceasefire, particularly Turkey Federation. Then, of course, in the report, they say things that are, frankly speaking, not exactly accurate. This is my definition about the chain of supply and goods and armaments. This is my personal opinion, of course. But in view of the extended time of 2 years for IRINI, already recognized a few weeks ago, Admiral Agostini, something more should be done. And this is my proposition, my final part of my intervention. I indicated 6 points. Point number 1, political leaders cannot simply note what didn't work while remaining inactive on what didn't work should be done. This is a principle of political responsibility, which is the other side of the coin of the leadership. If you are a leader, you cannot simply say, okay, this didn't work. How to do better, please, since you are the political leader. And, of course, we need more UN Security Council, I would say frankly, political and decisional support to strengthen the system of the sanctions for the violation found. Because the sanction system is what is the real deterrent for those who aim at violating the rules, and in particular, the rules of embargo, as well as to strengthen IRINI's role on inspections and boarding when necessary. These are rules of engagement that, especially after having said too much, too long, what didn't work in the first phase of IRINI now should be translated into reality. Because it is simple to put on the table a big book and then okay, this is our analysis. Normally, after an analysis, deeds have to follow. My point number 2, further to stronger rules of engagement, IRINI needs more assets on the seas and on the air, including a much more significant amount. It is not a minor aspect, a significant amount of flight hours authorized for monitoring. At my times, during the European mission to help Spain in Canary Island, we were able to mobilize 13 countries. Now IRINI has mobilized 24 countries. And nevertheless, there is a shortage in the authorization of the hours to fly to monitor, which is a key component, is not a particular and minor aspect for the success of a mission. We have to take into consideration, these are not bureaucratic elements, these are substance. My point number 3, we need finally to open a permanent coordination between IRINI and AFRICOM. There is the reflection underway for some time now. We need to make it operational. Why? Because if America is not fully, completely on board, it's illusory, Italy alone, and even Europe alone, to succeed in the middle of the Arab world, with the plenty of militias, of terrorist groups, and with the presence of 2 big states, Russia and Turkey, that have no interest at all to leave the country. You know what the new Prime Minister of Libya told my Prime Minister, Mr. Draghi, during the visit. My first priority is to make my country free from the foreign presence that amount to roughly 20,000 people. Prime Minister Draghi was really surprised, and he said, "Is that a mission impossible, Mr. Prime Minister?" And the Prime Minister of Libya said, "No, if the international support will be there." This is absolutely clear. The second element of cooperation, which is badly needed in my view, is a great and continuous NATO-EU cooperation on Libya. Continuous cooperation broader than in Libya, in the whole of the Mediterranean region, because NATO is changing its approach. Is changing its approach by, I would say, deepening its extremely important role of political actor. NATO is not, in my personal view, an organization to make the war. It is an organization to play politically and to have a strategy and to prevent the crisis instead of, as this was the case, necessary, by the way, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and other places in the world, to act militarily. But NATO has a political dimension, and the cooperation with non-NATO members is there to show without a cooperation with Arab countries, it's difficult to succeed in the heart of the Arab world. This is why Europe and NATO has a role to work together structurally. My point number 4, we need a very strong, united European political stance before UN Security Council to overcome the likely reluctance of some of the P5. I was, from the very beginning, with all the respect of the European permanent members, a partisan of the European seat around the table of the UN Security Council. We will not have the European seat tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, but unity, yes. This is badly needed. A coordination of EU before the Security Council to push United States and to try to explain to the reluctant states of P5 that is the moment is now is absolutely necessary. My point number 5, we need President Biden fully cooperating by giving new priority to this region. Though the first step echo rather the Obama-Clinton's will not to do more than leading from behind, please at least do lead from behind. Be there, help us, help Europe. It is easy to say, this is your backyard, this is your neighborhood, it's up to you. I used to be called American with K, so nobody more than me can be indicated as non-fervent supporter of Euro-American alliance, but America should be there. My point number 6, my final point, we should be, as European Union, realistically looking at the future of these 2 important missions, EUBAM and IRINI, by keeping a dialogue with those countries that we like or not have a dominant role in Libya today, Russia and Turkey. You know what was the position of President Biden in words, because in the same time he invited President Putin to have a bilateral meeting. You know what my Prime Minister Draghi said about President Erdogan, but it is illusory that the Libyans, now and even more after the elections, are urged to choose between EU, except in case of a massive engagement of US, that I think is unlikely, unfortunately, and the two countries that protect, guarantee supplies, deploy weapons, deploy military forces on the ground. You know Libyans. I do know Libyans. If you put on the table a similar choice, it's hard to envisage what the answer of the Libyans and the elected Libyans that will be for sure not those that are in power now will be. The economic ties are important. I commend the efforts to help Libya revitalize its economy, which is a rich oil-based, energy-based economy, but they live in poverty now. and also to revitalize, and I'm saying as Italian, 2008 friendship agreement between Italy and Libya. But I would say, as you have seen, when President Erdogan decided, 13 ministers plus the Prime Minister of Libya decided to fly immediately to Ankara. This gives the idea of the relationships. And of course, the policies based on sanctions. I think about Turkey, I think about Russia, are not enough. We need absolutely dialogue. The same dialogue President Biden, despite all the problems, is trying to, I would say, explore with President Putin, and Europe is trying to explore with Turkey of President Erdogan, despite all the critical points, is absolutely necessary. I close my speech by mentioning to you not a document born in Italy, by the very newly published annual threat assessment of National Intelligence Agency of United States, 9th of April. Every year they put forward. It is composed of 27 pages. They speak about Libya at the page 25, like this. 8 lines, small paragraph. After talking at length about Asia, about China, about everything, at the very end of the report, 3 phrases on Libya. Do you know what they said? They say about Libya. The interim government of national unity will face enduring political, economic, and security challenges that have prevented previous governments from advancing reconciliation. That's all. This is the start of this short paragraph. And the second phrase is the following: instability and the risk of renewed fighting in Libya's civil war will persist this year, 2021, despite very limited political, economic, and security progress, and it might spill over into broader conflict as Libyan rivals struggle to resolve their differences and foreign actors exert influence. This is the opinion of our friends in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. Everything will depend on us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Frattini, for your experienced, wise, and illuminating considerations and opening remarks to this webinar. And I will ask our kind speakers to follow me in a quicker pace, quite quick, 2 rounds of questions and answers for you. President Frattini mentioned, for example, now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Nadim Kirkutli. President Frattini mentioned NATO as as a problem, as an organization, we have to include in the decision process. And by the way, Turkey is a member of NATO, while Russia is not. And given the situation we have on the ground, this is not a little problem. And President Frattini was also mentioning the fact that the underlying factor in Libyan internal alliances and internal enmities is tribal organizations called Kabyle. So we have the Kabilas, which are underlying militias, which are mining the possibility for a peace process. And on the other hand, we have the newly formed government by Mr. Dbeibeh, which is a company in transition towards election. In all this, what is the room for EU diplomatic efforts? Because we have to consider that the situation on the ground is very difficult, but at the same time, we need to do something, as President Frattini was recommending. So the floor is yours, Nadim Kirkutli, who are leading as one of the representatives, the European diplomatic effort. Because one thing is to be given as sure, we need more security and defense into Europe, and we need more Europe into security and defense. But security and defense are not the only thing we need. We need diplomacy. We need politics and policies. Mr. Kirkutli, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And good afternoon to President Frattini also, and Admiral Agostini, and Natalina Chea, the head of the EUBAM mission. It's very hard to add anything of substance after the tour d'horizon that was so very well elaborated by President Frattini. All the challenges we face on Libya and the role of potential role and current role of the EU's common security and defense policy and its missions in this regard. I think it's exactly, it's a very thorough analysis that we have here already on the table now. Now, in terms of the political side of things, or the diplomatic side of things, as the deputy head of delegation for the EU in Libya, and like others, we are working mostly from Tunis, but we've been regularly in Tripoli and Benghazi in recent months, and the head of the political team. I'll probably try to provide some elements, let's say, on the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day diplomatic efforts that we've participated in, that we've also pushed forward, let's say, since the Berlin conference in January 2020, so about a year and 3 months ago, 15 months ago. And I think it's interesting to see that in times when we have seen, I think many observers telling us that we are at the end of the era of multilateralism, that one EU member state, with the support of others and the EU, namely Germany, was able at the level of the Chancellor, together with Italy, France, and other countries from Europe and the international community, to help the UN Special Envoy Ghassan Salameh, the head of UNSMIL at the time, to relaunch a political process while the war in Libya was still going on. In not using traditional multilateral fora like the UN General Assembly or Security Council, but setting up a format of those countries that were involved and are still involved externally in the war in Libya. And of course, we would all hope now also in creating peace in Libya. And you mentioned, and President Frattini, of course, Russia and Turkey, but they're not the only ones. The United Arab Emirates and many other countries also, of course, play a big role in this regard. And eventually, there were military developments in 2020 with the Turkish intervention that contributed, together with the political process, at some point to, let's say, a fatigue, perhaps, and a stalemate militarily, that allowed in August 2020 then President Siraj and the Speaker of the Parliament, Aguila Saleh, in the East, to declare together in August a ceasefire. And this was a momentum where suddenly when we as the EU, as a soft power, as an economic power, as a political power, but not necessarily as a military strongman, in times of war, obviously it is, let's say, not the best theater for us to become effective. But with a political process that eventually grasped the Libyan players as an alternative to the war that they also saw nobody could win last year. That political process allowed us to play politically a better role, but also, for example, and we will hear later on from Admiral Agostini and Head of Mission Natalina Cea, the role of our missions to be more effective, because as President Frattini said, without a political process and political support, these missions cannot be successful. But also the political process cannot be successful without effective instruments to implement what is being decided. And from then on, we had a period where the ceasefire agreement was eventually agreed on the 23rd of October last year. And there you could see, I think one element indeed will be from now on state building, nation building, and reconciliation and inclusiveness, as President Frattini already mentioned rightfully. Here we had senior military officers from both sides that were able to talk to each other relatively quickly to also agree on a ceasefire agreement, partially because some of them knew each other from the military academy, but partially also because there is a level of national identity that can be recreated, and which is now the task. And from then on, I think you will see that in the international working groups that are accompanying the process that led to the political dialogue forum and the approval of the government now in March, the first unity government in 7 years, and the first unified budget in 7 years, and the first time the parliament met in unity in 7 years, that this was also enabled by working on the three tracks, the political track, the economic track, and the security track, but working on them in parallel and in good coordination. And we have Italy as a co-chair of the security working group, Germany as a co-chair of the political group, and the EU together with the United States and Egypt as co-chair of the economic working group. And all of this is also intertwined in Libya. It's a conflict historically, especially since the revolution, obviously, about the resources, about oil and the oil revenues and who can benefit from them. And therefore, economy and security and politics are intertwined. And on that level, I think we managed to bring Libyans together. We reunified the central bank, the budget, and now also the government. And from now on, at this point, of course, the transition phase will be our support to the elections, politically, but also operationally, for the Elections Commission in Libya. We now have the Security Council resolutions that have basically enshrined the election date of the 24th of December at the level of a UN Security Council resolution, which is important, but also the withdrawal of foreign forces and the full implementation of the ceasefire agreement. And our two missions will definitely continue to play an even more important role. And Natalina recently spoke with us about, for example, the need to reunify the chain of command on, for example, the policing side, the security side, all across the country. And that will be another important element for inclusiveness and for reunifying Libya. I'll stop here and hand back the floor to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Karkutli, Deputy Head of Delegation, the European Mission to Libya, Head of Political Affairs and Press and Information. And coming now to Rear Admiral Agostini, who's been recently put in charge for the second time because the IRINI mission has been renovated, and he has a long experience in the international arena. He's been a commander of Sophia mission. Sophia mission was born mostly with the core mission of monitoring human trafficking and the situation of immigrants. And IRINI, despite doing also this as a collateral, has a different focus. More than 1,500 vessels controlled, 60 inspections on board, dozens of air missions controlled, and many, many other things to ensure security. The maritime importance of security, the maritime importance of the European presence, of our values, of our commitment to peace and security, as President Frattini was saying, our ability to prevent war more than to lose peace. I think this is something which we have to keep in mind. So, Rear Admiral Agostini, the floor is yours to give us some general frame of the mission, the mandate, and the tasks of this operation. And also, we are very proud that you've been renewed as the Commander-in-Chief.
Thank you very much, Professor Castelvecchi. And let me first of all thanks President Frattini, the Director General, Mr. Sarah Cavelli, and all the COE staff to have organized this event that it's worth to mention, gives also the start to the road to ShadeMed 2021. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to discuss the current state of play of Operation IRINI, but also to give a view on our role in the Libya stability process. Let me start on the some words that came from the speech of Mr. Frattini, President Frattini. The long-lasting lack of a fully effective state institution in Libya allowed the proliferation of illicit activities, including human and armed trafficking, oil smuggling, and terrorism. The situation now highlights the need for continued maritime security presence in the Central Mediterranean Sea, an area where other actors are increasing their footprint. We talk about Russia, Turkey, but also China, and whatever, to fulfill their own national interests. But let me say that beyond what they can be the goals of individual actors, a stable Libya should be everyone's objective, because it would increase security in the area, improve economy, and reduce, that is important also for Europe, migration flow in the region. That is the reason why European Union decided to adopt a more active and assertive stance within the framework of the Berlin process started in January last year. So Operation IRINI was launched on the 31st of March 2020, and despite the COVID pandemic, as already mentioned by President Frattini, on the 10th of September, we start to be operational. We declare our operational capability. And let me underline that as a lot of times underlined by Mr. Borrell, the High Representative of the European Union, Operation IRINI reflects the holistic approach agreed in the Berlin Conference, thus part of a process involving political, military, economic, and humanitarian tracks, as already mentioned by Mr. Karkouli. IRINI is not the solution of the Libyan crisis, but is an important tool in order to set the condition together with the EUBAM for the diplomacy to work towards a permanent solution to the Libyan instability. Following the strategic review that, as mentioned, has extended mandate of the operation for another 2 years until the 31st of March 2023, our task remain almost the same, and the main task, the primary task, remained the implementation of arms embargo imposed by the United Nations Security Council resolution, relevant resolutions. This resolution, it's particularly important for us, and we have to mention that the resolution, the most important resolution that authorized the offshore inspection and port diversion of suspected cargo that are alleged embargo breakers should be renewed before the 5th of June 2021. And this will be a very important step in the progress of the operation. The secondary tasks are not less important of the of the first one. For example, the monitor of illicit export of petroleum from Libya. Even this task is under the United Nations umbrella, and it is important because in the 10 years of war in Libya, the production of the legal production of oil and decreased to 1% of the world production. But we have to remember that Libya is the most important oil field in Africa. So now that the production and the exportation, the export is allowed, we can predict that the problem of illicit trafficking will not be solved very soon, given the fact that the smuggling phenomenon is connected with the other criminal activities, but also because there is still an unbalanced distribution of legal income. So that means that this is one of the main trouble that the new government will have to solve. Operation IRINI has also a role in the contribution of the disruption of the business model of human smuggling and trafficking. But we are doing that in a strict connection with the relevant European Union agency as Frontex, as it is Frontex. But we still believe that the most important way to dismantle this kind of trafficking is to train the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy, to give the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy the ownership of security in the water of their responsibility. Unfortunately, this task has not started so far for political reasons connected with the previous government, and we hope with the new government and a new impulse from European Union politics will improve the situation. This is an important task as the others, because as we see in the last year, in 2020, 25% more migrants departed from Libya compared to 2019. And the similar trend has been observed in the first 3 months of this year. So, for a number of reasons, of course, COVID was one of the reasons of this increase, but we cannot really discharge the possibility that the Libyan armed forces were influenced by third state, non-European state. Of course, there is a problem with the training of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy, the training that we provide, the training that has been provided by Eunavfor Med in the past. It's an important kind of training because is effective even against those that are really concerned about human rights, gender issue, and rights of minorities. So let's say that for the moment, for me, this is enough for the kind of task and that we are performing now.
Thank you, Admiral Agostini. So it's about oil and gas smuggling. It's about arms embargo. It's about human trafficking. And it's about many, many other problems that you are working. And we really think that what President Frattini said, that this mission should be not only strengthened in its naval assets and air assets, but also supported at a political international level, is definitely the only recommendation we can have. We need more IRINI assets at sea and on the ground. Otherwise, this process will not be completely fulfilled. And now let's come to Madame Natalina Cea, who is an experienced international cooperator, and she's been working for the Italian Customs Agency, the Italian Cooperation. Madame Natalina Cea, introducing you, I would like to remark that the EUBAM acronym is European Union Integrated Border Management Assistance Mission in Libya. It's quite restrictive, despite being extremely complex. It's quite restrictive because actually EUBAM is doing many things more and is intended to make the voice of Europe heard much wider than this technical mission, which is extremely delicate. So the floor is yours to give us a frame of EUBAM in Libya, its role and its target objectives in the next 2 years. Oh, we cannot hear you. You have to unmute your mic. You have to unmute your microphone.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Frattini, for this very interesting introduction and very strategic point. The 6 points are very interesting for the political, but also for us that are working at technical level. So let's give you some information concerning EUBAM. EUBAM is, I think, one of the oldest EU institution that is working in Libya. It was established in the framework of the Common Security and Defense Policy in 2013, and actually I was one of you can say the planner of this mission. So this means that I am very old, but okay. And so the mission, as you Chairman said, was meant to give support to the Libyan authorities, mainly on border at the beginning. And in fact, the main step that have been achieved so far are on border, because last year, after many discussions with the counterparts, a global reform for border agencies was agreed within the joint team on border, the so-called white paper, which are introducing institutional and legal reform in the border management in Libya. The document was endorsed by the group, but unfortunately, due to the political situation, was not approved by the former prime minister. So we are now in a different phase, we can say, at least for the country, and particularly for border management. So now we are in phase of discussions with the new government in order to see if their priorities, as Nadim said before, their priorities now are quite different from before. Are more linked to the reunification of the institutions and, of course, security forces and border agencies. And so now we are in discussions with them in order to see how we can integrate the new priorities in this very important document. After some years of border management, the mandate of the mission was integrated with 2 additional layers, we could say. The second one is the link to the law enforcement, and particularly to counterterrorism and organized crimes. Our main counterpart in these activities is the Ministry of Interior, and of course all the security forces operating on the ground. And the third one, line of operation, is linked to the criminal justice, which in my opinion, particularly in this moment, in dealing with also transitionally justice, you can imagine it's fundamental. So this line of operation is aimed at increasing the cooperation between the law enforcement and the justice from one side, and from the other side is to support the whole justice system in Libya. We have experts located in Tripoli. You know, the mission, due to the last civil war and due also to the COVID, was obliged to relocate some staff, before in Tunis, then in Europe. But now we have started finally with the current security situation. We have started the redeployment of all the staff from Tunis, and the current strength is 89 people, of which 65 international staff plus 24 local staff. So far, all the international staff are from member states, seconded or contracted. But as the President Frattini was saying before, it's very interesting that EUBAM mission can count also on the support of the 11 third contributing countries. So I think that in the future, we have to look on this possibility in order to increase the staff of the mission, and in also to to include in the whole package that we are offering to Libya also the cooperation and coordination with the other countries that are very important for Europe, but for Libya as well. One of the main, we can say, methodology that we are implementing for supplying assistance to the Libyan counterpart is the ownership, is to share with them our we can say ideas on how we see their future, their development for the future, but in a real partnership. We strongly think that the ownership by the counterpart is fundamental. If we don't have their understanding and approval, or at least of the general strategy and objective of the assistance, I think that any kind of support could fail, could really fail, or at least is not effective. So now, as I said, as methodology, first of all, ownership, second, integrated approach. As you can imagine, particularly in this moment, we have a lot of international actors on the ground, and together with the delegation and with IRINI, what we are doing is to try to build a package of assistance that can integrate all the efforts, first of all, from the EU within the EU family, and in addition to this, also from the member states and from UN or other third countries. For example, speaking with the Ministry of Interior during the last days, they have created also with our support an international committee for coordinating the assistance from different donors. And it is quite surprising, but not if we are thinking on the reality or also on other countries, to see that, for example, there are a lot of duplication, and there are a lot of efforts and a lot of money that are spent without a unique strategy. So okay. I would say that for our mission, it is, and then I will stop, it is fundamental, and I would like to stress this, that all our activities, training or advice, we are mainstreaming, of course, human rights and gender principle, because in this kind of activities that we are conducting, it's fundamental to teach them on this fundamental principle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalina Cea. We will come back in a few minutes to that inclusiveness and human rights as main goals of the EUBAM mission you're leading. With President Frattini, we're talking about the international support we need from NATO and from our friends, the Americans. With Rear Admiral Agostini, we've been talking about naval training, naval patrolling, and ensuring security. And with you, now it's about police and law enforcement and many other things. But now coming back to Nadim Kirkutli, One thing we, the Europeans, are quite strong at doing is managing free elections. This is one of our few good heritage, because we still didn't manage to build a very strong united military force. We are in the process of doing so. We're still managing with diplomatic effort to Libya. But one thing we are good at doing in our continent is managing elections. And now you are somehow overseeing the transitional political phase, the transitional process towards free elections in Libya. What's the contribution the European Union can give, and what do you think will be the main things you will be discussing with the new Debeba government in doing so?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The current contribution is, of course, is both political and financial. We do have a relatively well-led and truly independent National Election Commission in Libya. It's actually one of the few institutions that remained united all throughout the difficult and conflictual period of the past years. We are, as the European Union, the main donor to its operations. Of course, a lot of this contribution had to be put on the shelf for a long period because no elections were possible. That has been reactivated. We're contributing additional funds. We're working on this together with the UN and other donors. On the other hand, the political support for this process is even more important, both at, let's say, technical and national level. On the technical level, we are reminding individually as the European Union delegation, but also with member states and other international partners, the government that indeed the main bulk of the financing for the election has to come from the government, and it has now been put into the budget for the first unified budget in 7 years for 2021. It was one important element. The other element is that there are still different views in Libya between the old and still existing parliament, the House of Representatives, and the Election Commission and others on what constitutional basis these elections shall be held on for a president and for a new parliament as foreseen. Now I think we ourselves as Europeans, where we have much more audience now in Tripoli, that we have peace and a unified government, and a much more intense dialogue with the new prime minister and his ministers, but also an increasing presence. You may have, that's important, that Greece, Malta, France have reopened their embassies, and the EU delegation will also in the coming weeks in phases re-establish its presence in Tripoli, and others will follow. This is also important. On that basis, it will be important that by the end of June, the Libyans have agreed on the legal basis, on the electoral law and the constitutional basis to hold these elections, because the Commission needs 6 months minimum to hold and prepare the elections, and that's the 24th of December, as mentioned before. And this is where, let's say, the intra-Libyan process that we have with the existing institutions and the process that came out of the UN mediation, the Political Dialogue Forum, both have a mandate at this point to provide this legal basis, and both have commenced their work. And I think now the effort led by Jan Kubiš, the new UN Special Envoy of the Secretary General, with the institutions concerned, the Political Dialogue Forum, which are 75 Libyans chosen from across the population, and the existing and outgoing parliament, the House of Representatives, is to come together, make sure that in the coming weeks there will be a legislative agreement on this, and therefore, together with the UN Security Council resolution that we had on Friday, a Libyan and international firm commitment to this date and the right basis for these elections to be properly prepared, to be free and fair and meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkutli. Admiral Agostini, you are for the second mandate Commander-in-Chief of IRINI. So we should say mission accomplished for the first part. So what can you say you're proud of, but also what is the many do's and don'ts, the many targets you want to reach the next mandate in the next 2 years?
Thank you very much for this question. Of course, it's very difficult to draw a line and to see what could be considered successful or not. But let the numbers talk about that. We have investigated more than 2,700 merchant vessels in this year. We monitor more than 200 suspect flights, 25 airports, 16 ports, and we have visited more than 100 merchant vessels, 11 of which were deeply inspected. In one case, only one case, we found what we can consider military material on the motor vessel Royal Diamond 7, coming from the Emirates to Benghazi, carrying 13,000 tons of jet fuel. This was the first, and then I took the decision to divert this vessel to a European port. Let me say, I'm proud of the fact that this was the first even diversion operation conducted by our European operation. But the most important thing is that since the beginning of the operation, we have provided 22 special reports to UN Security Council, 19 of them with evidence of both armed trafficking of oil smuggling. This data and all these reports were important for the UN Security Council resolution reports that you mentioned, President, before, because all the information we provide to the Security Council enter in these reports. So the reports were possible thanks to our information about embargo breakers. All this data show that Operation IRINI is not against anybody. We are there to implement the arms embargo through the whole of our operation, regardless the actor involved. But beside these evident numbers, these evident results, there are other results that I would like to mention. First of all, we establish an evident strong presence in the area of operation. We are generating a clear deterrence effect, in particular on the maritime side. And we are recognized now as a relevant actor. And we are cooperating now with a number of regional stakeholders, and as, for example, EUBAM, as already mentioned. As President Frattini mentioned before, the stall with the US commands in the area and NATO are still a reason of concern. In my humble opinion, an agreement of exchange of information both with NATO commands, AFRICOM, EUCOM, or NATO will improve the effectiveness of the operation on one side, but also the regional balance in favor of NATO and US command in an area where IRINI, US commands, but also NATO share the same common security interests. In general terms, IRINI is also important for the international shipping community. They look at us as a security provider in the area, and security means less cost for the maritime and transportation, and this is another important point for the international shipping community. In sum, despite Operation IRINI was started in full COVID pandemic, we have already achieved some important results. Of course, the results could be better if we have more assets, more intelligence, more Stratcom. But we are quite happy with what we had achieved. there are a lot of political difficulties given the very complex arena in which we are moving, but at the same time, we are convinced that a stable Libya will increase the security economy in the region. Let me underline a final point. IRINI is now the only international actor that is implementing the arms embargo on Libya. And this is an important resource.
Thank you, Maragostini. Natalina Cea, you're managing a mission which takes in charge a very porous southern border. I think one of the most difficult borders in the world, involved geopolitical balances. You're taking in charge the training of police forces, law enforcement, and many other complex problems. And we have to know in advance that the possibility to achieve a national union in this country is not to be taken for granted, as President Frattini was saying. We have the risk of a country which is splitted into many parts and risks to remain splitted even after the elections. So what is the contribution that your mission and this effort from the European community can give to the unification process, which is one of the most difficult things ahead of us?
Yeah, very challenging question. I will try to respond in also considering that, of course, as you well know, the mission is operating within the common and security and defense policy, and the member states are those who are deciding about the mandate of the mission. Now, our mandate is expiring at the end of June. We will start the new mandate as of 1st of July, and will last for 2 years. Of course, we can say the approach before the signing of the ceasefire agreement was completely different from the EU, because the situation was completely unstable. Security on the ground was very volatile, and of course, also, as I said, the mission was limited at very few staff on the ground. With the new government, of course, the situation is completely changed. The new, we can say, priorities for them are, first of all, to redesign the chain of command. And concerning our mission, is important, of course, for border agencies, for the Ministry of Interior, and for the Ministry of Justice. And so, as we are doing, advising, we have in our mandate advice to them. Of course, they have asked to be supported on this, and of course we have to do within our mandate. But their request, as you said, concerning the border, immigration, illegal trafficking, and so on. Well, their idea is now that in the past, international community has only, supported the Libya in order to control the north part of the country, which are allowing migrants and trafficking to go to Europe. But now there is a strong request from the new government to start thinking on what can be done in the south. President Frattini was rightly underlining the links between the Sahel, Sahara, and Libya. We should not forget that Libya is as the border with Niger, as border with Chad, and as border with Sudan. So what is the approach that we are following? First, of course, we have to apply a gradual and step-by-step approach. Our first initiative has been to create a cooperation between Libya and the neighbor countries. in this case, counterparts, police and border guards, immigration services, and so on. And in what way we are doing this? We have in Mali, in Niger, and we have the regional cooperation cell in the Sahel that is located in Mauritania, but is responsible for 5 countries, including Chad. So we have created a forum, a joint forum with our sister missions. And within this forum, our idea is to allow the counterparts, so our local counterparts, to meet and to agree and possibly to sign a memorandum of understanding. For example, the Libyans are asking to have a memorandum of understanding with the Niger in order to exchange information and in order to see how the southern border can be controlled. So I think that this is also, you know, a new approach, innovative, because it's integrating not only the EU, but as well as the local counterparts in a way that we can really have information on what is happening, because, you know, there are parts of the south, as you said, of the border, but also on the internal territory, completely abandoned and not controlled by the state. So, and in this case, we don't have even information on what is happening. So this is one of the main, I think, support that we can give for the future for the new government, together with the involvement of the civil society. Civil society are fundamental in order to have a real clue of the situation on the ground. And as the mission, as for now, is located in Tripoli, we are doing Tripoli-based activities, but we need to have a clear idea of what is happening in the east and in the south, in order to prepare a comprehensive package together with, of course, the delegation, using all the programs and projects that are on the table for Libya, in a way that we can really, for this time, support the unity government.
Thank you, Natalina Chair. Now, before going to conclusions, just a few, very few questions, I'm sorry, from the audience. We have to do to pick up a little selection, and I will ask our kind contributors to be answering just in a flash, because we are going to close, but the questions have to be responded. Admiral Agostini, you were mentioning the United Nations effort, and what will be, I mean, in the ceasefire monitoring, what will be like the United Nations the collaboration of IRINI with United Nations?
Well, our cooperation now with the United Nations is a very good level, in particular with the UN panel of experts. As regard of the ceasefire, let me be diplomatic on this issue. It's not up to me to decide if IRINI could monitor the ceasefire or not. But let me say that in our tasks, we have achieved a very good level of understanding of the environment in the Central Mediterranean Sea, both on maritime, air, and land situation. So if the international community, the United Nations, the Libyans decide so, and the EU member state will decide so, and approve that, we are ready to increase our role, even in the eventuality of monitoring the ceasefire. But it's not up to me to decide that.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral. You clearly demonstrated that now and then a military, an admiral, a commander needs to be a good diplomat. The tone of voice of your answer clearly spoke of this, and we're sure you will do a great job in this. And one question for Mr. Karkutli, sorry. It's about, as Natalina Chair was mentioning, there is a civil society to talk to in Libya. We tend to think about Libyans, or at least in the media, we see that the country described, you know, as an ensemble of thugs, criminals, warriors, smugglers, human traffickers. But there is also experienced diplomats, scholars, university professors, professionals, politicians, people of experience who can help the country to find its unity. And so I would like to ask you about, you were mentioning before an experienced diplomat. What experienced diplomat? What is the tone of the diplomacy of the country? Do you think you will be able to rebuild a political dialogue and a diplomatic dialogue with this troubled country?
So, of course, a multifaceted question. I think I try to be brief. As you said, we are closing, but of course, let's say 3-4 elements or levels to this. One is now we have a unified government that both in the Presidential Council, which has 3 members for the 3 parts of the country, the Cyrenaica in the east, the Tripolitania in the west, and the Fezzan in the south, are represented. The Prime Minister has 2 deputies also representing the 3 regions of Libya. This is important. We have now a government where we can talk to all Libyans, government to government level or diplomatic official level. That's, I think, for this government and for a future government after the elections is important, because we did not have you know, really people representing Libya and the Libyans during the split, the war, and the conflict before. This is one thing. Then Libya is a very young population. There are a lot of young people, and only the minority of them are recruited into militias and running around with guns. A lot of young people who have dreams, who want to start enterprises, who want to finish school, who want to finish university, who are active to fight for freedom of speech and for a free and democratic society. But Libya never had this kind of structure in the society. There were no institutions or civil society under Gaddafi for, I don't know, 40 years or longer. And it still has to grow. And I think our contribution really will be to seek dialogue in the society with these young people, but also with scholars, experts, others, to help the civil society to grow and to underpin the process of Libyans coming together again as one country and one people. So these are the 2 levels I think we should work in response to the question. Over. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Karkutli. Before concluding with President Frattini, one last question for Natalie Miacea, which cannot be eluded, given the importance of its of this momentous thing in EUBAM, which is throughout the Middle East, we've seen that there is a complex movement towards gender equality. Mohammed VI, the King of Morocco, has been approving some constitutional innovations. In Tunis, during the Ennahda government, there was a very hard struggle in the parliament to approve some bills which could pass, a better gender equality. Even in Wahhabi Saudi Arabia, we are starting to see some improvements. And funny enough, it is quite ironic, but even being told that women can drive, it sounds like an innovation sometimes. Moroccan writer Rita El Kayat, to which our country granted citizenship because she was endangered for fighting for gender equality from Morocco, she once said to me, gender equality equals the destiny of the Middle East. So the destiny of the Middle East is gender equality, and the success of democracy in the Middle East will have to do with gender equality. I think you do agree with this as a general sentence, but what is the role of gender equality policies within EUBAM mission?
Yeah, as I said before, we have one senior advisor on gender, and we are doing. We could not avoid this. First of all, because I am a woman, and secondly, because we are a European institution. And we are giving the example currently because our mission has reached now 40% of women, and some of them are at leadership level. And so I'm very happy for this. I will continue to struggle for having more women in leadership position. Yeah, what we are doing doing a lot of activities actually. We are leading a group on gender responsive for rule of law, justice and security, and is led by our advisor on gender and human rights. We are conducting, for example, an assessment with our counterparts in order to see what is the level of gender representation within the Libyan border agencies. And of course, we are cooperating with the civil society organizations that are promoting gender and human rights. I think that all these activities will be continued during the next mandate and even increased because, well, we are dealing with something like border management, law enforcement, criminal justice. I strongly think that no activities can be done effectively without women.
Thank you very much. So coming to conclusions, President Frattini, I was talking before about, going to school and lessons learned. I'm sure that if you give us your comments about everything which has been said, you could give us homework for the next years, definitely.
Well,
but unfortunately, we don't have much time. So I just would like to come back on one of your most inspiring remarks. It was about the role of the USA.
Yeah.
Do you think that with the election of Biden administration, the things will change? And if they will, how and how much will they change?
Many thanks, Professor. We have been talking about an ongoing process in a very fascinating, very interesting way. Nobody is able today to draw any kind of conclusions. I would like just to, while thanking all the speakers, highlight 4 points, just in titles, that have emerged and that will be representing the keys to try to succeed. The point number 1, political leadership is badly needed. Nobody could happen if all those that will be operational on the ground and on the seas will feel and will perceive and will have political support. And political leaders should be very well committed. This is exactly what applies to our Europe. Why? Because Europe is putting at stake its credibility. If we fail in Libya once again, European credibility in a moment where apparently there is a strong unity on the same goals, and nevertheless we fail, our credibility will be greatly reduced. Also to taking into account that the picture of Europe could change in the next months significantly. Let's consider that 2 months before the elections in Libya, we could have in Germany a different ruling coalition. What will happen in this case? Point number 3, engagement of United States. Yes, Professor, I think Biden will understand. Biden will directly, AFRICOM, or indirectly through NATO, understand America should return to make America. America is America. It's not America dictating and exporting democracy, but granting a great contributing for stabilization. And this is the role, the historical role of the constitutional Republican or Constitution of Republic of the Federal American United States. I think sooner or later, this is my caveat, sooner or later, President Biden will understand the role of America again is now. Is not just to think about Asia. President Trump left a very difficult legacy to President Trump. We cannot deny how to deal with the Pact of Abraham, how to deal with the negotiations with Iran, what to do with Saudi Arabia, what to do with Turkey, and so on and so forth. But this is the stability of the whole Mediterranean. America cannot and will not, in my opinion, ignore. The point number three, the key point number three, just reaffirmed by our speakers, is the Libyan ownership. Nobody can be done on the shoulders of Libyans if the Libyans are not themselves involved. I remember one of the important members of the previous Libyan government, one of the potential strong candidates in the incoming campaign, he told me 2 years ago, don't you think we have in Libya the same political opinion reflected in the press you have in Europe? Very clear question. We have to take into consideration the era of Western going to Libya and saying, this is the best, please follow it, or even worse, keep or leave it. It's absolutely over. This is why ownership is the key. Who can imagine to make Libya free from Russians and Turkey if one day it will happen without having the Libyans in the forefront? And the number 4 of the key points that have emerged, in my view, lastly, in the very important words of Madam Natalina Chair, no security, no prosperity, no stability at the expenses of the vulnerable categories of people. Nobody can imagine to do it at the expenses of non-negotiable human rights. So the other key points, how to strike the right balance between security and protecting and promoting human rights. If we will be taking into consideration all these points, I know very well Jan Kubiš. He used to be my colleague as the Slovak minister for 3.5 years. He's one of the persons that should take the lead in this kind of process, helping, persuading, encouraging, coordinating, promoting new alliances like non-European countries. We are in the middle of the Arab world. How is it possible not have on the table with full role, an important role to cooperate Arab countries? I think persons like Jan Kubiš and the others that will be involved will be on the forefront on trying to strike the balance. No security without full respect of human rights. I mentioned this point as a last one because under the human points of view, it is the most important for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Frattini. And now we're closing this webinar, which has been dedicated to the European Common Security and Defense Policy in Libya. And I want to thank our distinguished speakers, Natalina Cea from EUBAM Mission and Nadim Karkutli. Vielen Dank oder Shukran Jazilan, because I read you are German Syrian, so maybe I was thanking you in two of your many languages you speak. And I want to thank Rear Admiral Agostini. And remember to you, keep in track what is happening within IRINI mission, which is an excellent communicating hub through the website, through the social media, because this webinar is one of the many milestones as a path to Shade Med, which will be the Autumn Congress, where will the maritime problems connected to the Libyan crisis will be discussed in. And thanking President Frattini and the CIOI, I just close with one sentence. We all remember that our Prime Minister Mario Draghi, at the time President of ECB, in a famous speech in London, once said that he would have been done whatever it takes to save euro. And then after he paused and he said, and be sure it will be enough. Now, after listening to you, we want to be sure that everybody will do, European community will do, the European Union will do whatever it takes to save Libya. And we're sure that with your help, it will be enough. Thank you very much. And good evening to you all.
Bye-bye, many thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Arrivederci.